Help! I need somebody. Help! Not just anybody. Help! I need somebody. Help! When I was younger, so much younger than today, everybody's help free. So instead of a sermon, we're just going to do a Beatles sing along. Hell. This has been a very hard year. It's been a hard year to be Jewish. It's been a hard year for our country. And it's been a hard year for the world. So the year that we've had and this year that we can see coming, it makes it a little harder to say, Lashana Tova, Tikatevu, Metuka. Happy New Year. May you have a good and sweet year. Right? So I see a lot of people smiling, which is lovely. But I want to acknowledge that there's probably more grief present than in most Rosh Hashanahs that we get together. There's just so much that has been broken. And we don't see people doing the work to put the brakes on all this breaking that's happening. And for me, at least, it's really disorienting to have that happening and have our lives continuing as usual. Working, vacation, maybe going out to dinner, streaming some TV, while my nervous system is just on overload. Just like crisis, danger, respond, run, do something. So I paused in writing this talk last week, and I looked at the talk that I gave last year on Rosh Hashanah. And that sermon also began by reflecting on what a hard year it had been, and about how important it would be for us to be kind to each other, for us to be especially kind in the year that we thought was coming ahead, and in particular related to the challenges in Israel and the war in Gaza. And it was a very hopeful sermon. And it just made me weep. Because everything that I said last year would be completely worth repeating this year, except that sermon didn't imagine that this year we might feel that things were darker, that things might feel less hopeful. But here we are. So I shared a draft of this sermon with my wonderful son, Sam, who is 21 years old. For some of you might have a hard time believing that. He said to me, Abba, you're the rabbi. You can't be so negative. You have to let people know it's going to get better. So, okay, Sam. I do have faith that things can get better. And I know that we can find ways to act, and that we will find ways to act that help us feel more aligned and less alienated. And eventually I will get to some of that today. And hopefully I'll say a little bit more of it on Yom Kippur. We've built such a strong community here at B'nai Keshet. But I think that strengthening it further is now an urgent matter. And I don't think that we will be able to act wisely or to support each other as a community and to face the year ahead unless we turn toward the pain we feel specifically in relationship to Israel and the war in Gaza and the divisions that it is causing among Jews and the divisions that it's causing even here at B'nai Keshet. We're still processing the trauma of October 7th, and it's an ongoing trauma. There are thousands of families in Israel who are still trying to fill a hole left in their lives by Hamas. There are still 48 hostages in Gaza. And this trauma that we're feeling, it's reawakening every time we hear another story of a hostage who won't be returning home. And many of us are still reeling from the failures of the world to face the horror of October 7th as a humanitarian tragedy, rather than just another episode, the latest chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And at the very same time, we are also in despair from the subsequent trauma caused by the war in Gaza, by images of destroyed Palestinian neighborhoods and starvation, by the death toll that keeps rising, whether calculated by Israel, calculated by Hamas. And either of these things by themselves would be enough to break our hearts. And I think it's obvious why they are bound together, but it is also crazy-making to be processing them simultaneously. I think it makes sense, as your rabbi, to talk about Israel about once every 5 years or so on the high holidays. There's just a lot of things to talk about, you know? There's life is so big. There's things in the world in Judaism. I'm speaking to you today about the situation in Israel and Gaza pretty much against my will. Because I think it would be wrong to turn away from the issue that most threatens our ability to be a community that can stand together and face what I think is going to be a very hard year ahead. It's become the practice of Rabbi Ariane and I to prioritize strengthening B'nai Keshet's ability to speak to each other, for you to be able to speak to each other about Israel, to prioritize that over sharing our own opinions. Because we know you have the same access to articles in the New York Times, to news sources from Israel, the same access that we do. And we love, we value, we respect that there are people in this community who come to different conclusions than our own. We love that, and we love those people. But as your rabbis, we also feel that we have a responsibility to be a moral compass. So my hope in speaking today is that I'm accepting this responsibility. Let me take a breath. Maybe you want to take a breath. Earlier this summer, Rabbi Ismar Shorsh, the Chancellor Emeritus of the Conservative Movement's Jewish Theological Seminary, wrote how challenging it was this year to observe Tisha B'Av, the day that's set aside specifically as the day to face Jewish suffering. And he wrote, "Our immediate challenge as Jews is to make sure that Judaism as religion is not submerged and shredded by the power of the Jewish state. The unremitting violence against helpless Palestinians in Gaza and their wholly innocent co-religionists on the West Bank will saddle Jews with a repulsive religion riddled with hypocrisy and contradictions. The messianism driving the current government of Israel is sadly out of kilter with traditional Judaism and an utter moral abomination. So, for those who don't know him, I want to just really emphasize this is not a student activist. This is not an anti-Zionist. These are the words of one of the pillars of conservative Judaism. And I want to tell you that I agree with Rabbi Schorsch that we must make sure the Jewish religion is not submerged and shredded by the power of the Jewish state. I believe that Netanyahu has acted criminally in ways that have harmed the Jewish people and that have stained the reputation of Israel, but most importantly, have led to an atrocity of Palestinian death. And I'm embarrassed that the leadership of our Jewish legacy organizations like our federations, like the ADL, like the American Jewish Congress, are still, to this day, 2 years later, failing to criticize Netanyahu. I just can't find better words for what is happening in Gaza than those of Rabbi Schorsch. It is an utter moral abomination. Also this summer, Rachel Goldberg Poland, the extraordinary and heroic mother of slain hostage Hirsch Goldberg Poland, wrote, "With thousands and thousands suffering in our battered region, I would like to get up on the highest table in the area and, like Norma Rae, hold up a homemade sign that says plainly, 'Enough.' Enough of the hostage families trying to convince the world that stealing our children is not an option. Enough of innocent people suffering from lack of resources, water, food, medical care, clothing. Enough of leaders using their people as props. It is time for this excruciation to end. The innocent people in Gaza, the ones who've lived there for a long time, and the innocent people in Gaza who were dragged there from Israel on October 7th have had it. We, the people who love them, are broken. And so, you handful of men with the ability, make this end right now. I appeal to you as a mother of a glorious, forever 23-year-old son, for whom it is too late. I appeal to you simply as nobody. My name is Rachel. I'm absolutely nobody. And therefore, I am everybody. Rachel Goldberg Poland is right. She's absolutely everybody when she says enough. It was enough a long time ago. One more piece. Also last month, 80 Orthodox rabbis published a letter that has shaken up the modern Orthodox world in the US and the religionist Zionist movement in Israel. Their very Zionist letter condemns Hamas and its role contributing to the suffering of the people in Gaza, but says this does not absolve Israel's government from assuming its share of the responsibility for the profound suffering of Gaza's civilian population. It was initiated by, among others, Rabbi Yosef Blau, former president of the Religious Zionists of America, and Mashkiach Rouhani, the spiritual director for the rabbinic program at Yeshiva University, a cornerstone of the American Orthodox community. Those rabbis write, "The justified anger toward Hamas has been dangerously expanded by extremists into blanket suspicion of the entire population of Gaza, children included, tarnished as future terrorists. In the West Bank, settler violence has resulted in the murder of civilians and forced Palestinians from their homes." And they continue, "This moment demands a grounded This moment demands a voice grounded in our deepest Jewish values and informed by our traumatic history of being victims of persecution. We must affirm that Judaism's vision of justice and compassion extends to all human beings. Our tradition teaches that every person is created b'tselem Elohim, in the divine image. We are the spiritual descendants of Abraham, chosen to walk in the path of Hashem, to do righteousness and justice. Allowing an entire people to starve stands in stark contrast to this teaching. So, describing Israel's actions as a moral abomination does not make me feel good. It makes me sick to my stomach. Notice how you're feeling. I am saying these words as somebody who loves Israel. I grew up with the stories of Israel as a socialist underdog. I went directly from high school to volunteer on a kibbutz. I went and volunteered at Kiryat Shmona, a town on the northern periphery of Israel where I could watch and hear battles happening in Lebanon from my balcony. I felt so much pride and hope when Rabin signed the Oslo Accords. But the thing is I keep hearing from parents of Jews who are in their 30s that their children are moving away from their Jewish identity, primarily because they don't have the energy to sift through their complex feelings about Israel. Jews in their 30s don't remember Oslo. They don't remember the peace movement that propelled it. They don't remember Rabin as a hawk turned peacemaker. For nearly their entire lives, the Israel that the Jewish community has asked them to support has been the Israel of Netanyahu. They've only seen the peace process get undermined. They've only seen things get worse. They have no memory of a more hopeful time. And many young Jews would rather forego their Judaism than feel connected with this Israel. But I know that me condemning the war in Gaza or the actions of Israel's government or Hamas, I know that it's not going to change much. And I'm sure that in this room today, there are some who felt agreement and validation with the words that I said. And I'm certain equally that there are some who feel frustration, maybe even anger, maybe alienation to hear those words in their synagogue. I know that there are some here who would call my condemnations one-sided or naive. There are some who would wish that I more righteously condemned Israel as the cause of Palestinian suffering. And there's probably some who just wish I had, followed my initial instinct and talked about something else. And you know what? I'm sympathetic to these emotions because I feel connected to you. As your rabbi, I feel bound to you. But I also feel it because I have felt those emotions. And we're likely only at the beginning of coming to terms with the impact of the last 2 years. So there is a story in the Talmud of two study partners, Rabbi Yochanan and who's a great teacher, and Rabbi Reish Lakish, his best student, who is also a former bandit. And one day, as they were engaged in debate, a moment came when they were discussing swords and how a sword can become susceptible to impurity. And their argument devolved from matters of ritual significance to personal attacks. And Rabbi Yochanan insulted Reish Lakish. A thief knows the tools of his trade. And Reish Lakish retorted, "What good have you done me?" And their personal attacks actually made Yochanan's spirit go weak. And Reish Lakish literally became sick. But Rabbi Yochanan refused to reconcile. and Reish Lakish died of his spiritual wounds. And their students, seeing their teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, in grief, they tried to comfort him by bringing him a new, brilliant student to be his study partner. And this student supported his every argument. Yochanan responded, "Do you think I need this?" When I used to say something to Reish Lakish, he would pose 24 objections, and I would have to give 24 solutions. Rabbi Yochanan lost his mind. He walked through the streets of Tiberia, crying out, "Reish Lakish, where are you?" until his soul departed. We need community that will do more than reflect back our own beliefs. We need partners who will say to us, "Here are things you haven't considered. All Yisrael, all Jews are bound one to the other. Kol Yisrael, Aravim ze bezeh." We're woven of the same cloth. We feel the tension of what is happening in Israel and Gaza in our bodies. When we start seeing Jews who disagree with us as the problem, when we distance ourselves from them or even demonize them, it creates a painful tension in the fabric of our souls. In recent months, I have heard B'nai Keshet members say things like, "I'm appalled to hear we're even considering. I can't pray with the synagogue if I will leave the synagogue if you..." And let me just remind you, these words are being spoken by kind people who are dedicated to our community from across the political perspectives, from multiple political perspectives. The thing is this, that too often such expressions have the impact of threats. They reduce the possibility of listening. They narrow the space for collaboration and creativity. I have never, ever before struggled so hard to maintain my own equanimity. And there have been moments when I have felt my own equanimity just dissolve into righteous anger. I think that these strong feelings and emotions are partly the result of witnessing what is happening, but feeling helpless to stop it. There's just no obvious or immediate path for us to thwart Hamas, for us to meaningfully impact Israel's government, or our own government, or the national Jewish organizations representing us, or the leadership at the colleges where our kids are at school. And so sometimes we direct our fear and our anger and our heartbreak and our moral indignation at our own synagogue, and sometimes even at each other. So I have a suggestion. Let's stop. Let's just stop blaming each other. When our hearts are sick with worry for the hostages or for the future of Israel, let's stop blaming each other for suffering and death that's happening to civilians trapped in Gaza. Let's just stop making things worse by misdirecting our righteous anger at Hamas or the current Israeli government toward each other. Let's just stop. B'nai Keshet has done as good as any synagogue that I am aware of, and I am aware of a lot of synagogues, at holding a wide breadth of opinions, at supporting each other when we're having hard conversations. And Rabbi Ariane and I, we believe that meaningful community within the walls of our synagogue requires facing what concerns us outside the walls of our synagogues. We believe that struggling together, that choosing to listen when we know we disagree, when we're afraid even, that struggle builds trust and brings depth to our community. The diversity of opinions our community holds regarding Israel and Palestine strengthens us. So what should we do? We should speak out, but we should speak out humbly. We should take action, but when we take action, we should know that to have impact, to build power, we will need to bring others along. And we should be suspicious of actions that target other Jews. And we should be particularly suspicious of actions that target our community. And most importantly, and I really think this is the very most important thing, we just have to keep coming to synagogue. And we got to learn, we got to pray, we have to celebrate, and we have to do it knowing that right beside us is somebody we disagree with, and that that's okay, that that's actually good, that we need that. We should listen to the commandment that is present in the words of the Shema, a commandment to Shema Yisrael. Listen to other Israelites. Listen to Jews. Listen to the people of your community. It is so challenging to feel disagreement in your synagogue, especially when you are feeling issues that you think are related to the things that will keep us safe or to things that make you feel shame. That is why Shema Yisrael is a commandment. And the commandment of Shema Yisrael is followed by a promise of blessing. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu. We will come to see our God, Adonai Eloheinu, in each other's aspirations, in each other's hopes, holding the tension that exists in our differences. That is what allows us to proclaim Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that all of us are part of one God. Holding that tension, listening, we realize that we can differ without breaking apart. Some of you are familiar with a group in Israel called the Parents Circle and Family Forum. It's an organization of Israelis and Palestinians who mourn family members who died because of the conflict and who get together and hold each other as in their mutual mourning. So they sent me an email last week sharing the pledge that their bereaved members each make one to the other. I want to ask you to consider joining this pledge. I'm making this pledge today on Rosh Hashanah. Peace is not weakness, it is courage. I pledge to walk the path of peace every day in thoughts, words, and actions. I pledge to choose peace over pain, to choose peace even in pain. I recognize that no grief is greater than another, and that shared humanity can begin with shared sorrow. I will listen with empathy and speak with respect. I honor the courage of those who extend a hand across divides, and I strive to do the same. I will stand for dignity, quality, and shared humanity of all people. I will work to dismantle the structures and narratives that perpetuate fear and separation. I commit to resolving conflict through nonviolence. I will seek reconciliation through dialogue, empathy, and respect for all people. I make that pledge today. If these Palestinians and Jews who have lost so much can have the courage to sit together and pledge peace and empathy and respect, how is it possible that we would not, in this much, much safer space, where so much less is at stake? Let me remind you where I started my talk today. We need each other's help right now. And we need it not only to face our despair, but to find a way to repair all of this brokenness. And not just in Israel and Gaza, but right here. my favorite Buddhist teacher, Thich Nhat Hanh, writes the following. Many of us worry about the world. As individuals, we feel hopeless, despairing. The situation is so dangerous. Injustice is so widespread. The danger so close. He describes the time when Vietnamese people were fleeing, crossing the Gulf of Siam in little small boats, how people would panic, making the boat much more likely to capsize. He says, but if one person could remain lucid and calm, knowing what to do and what not to do, that person could help the boat survive. One such person can save the lives of many. Our world is something like a small boat, and we may be about to panic because our situation is not better than a small boat in the sea. We need people who can sit still, who are able to smile, and who can walk peacefully in order to save us. You are that person. Each of us is that person. Thich Nhat Hanh is reminding us that our calm, mindful action is important not only for ourselves, but because it can help keep those we love, those here in this community, safe. We should be very wary. We should be wary of our tendency to separate ourselves from other Jews, to divide ourselves into good and bad Jews. I know the people in this room pretty well. And I can tell you, we are all good Jews. And we need to get better at loving other Jews, including the Jews not in this room. And even when we have meaningful disagreements. And we're Jews, we should be good at this. We're the people who insisted on recording dissenting opinions in the Talmud. We're the ones who have the story of Yochanan and Reish Lakish. We have very, very good reason to care disproportionately about Israel, but we should be wary about how these worries and these efforts can sometimes distract us from harm that's happening closer to home. The despair that we're feeling about what's happening in the US, the thing is, that can't stay despair. Harm is happening here, and it's happening close. It's close enough for us to touch. We're going to have our hands full trying to put the brakes on all this breaking. We need to start to move from disbelief and grief toward organizing and toward healing action. Because there is more than ever that needs repair. But we can actually make this a good year as we get stronger and more able to embrace our partnership with God, Tikkun Olam, our partnership to repair the world. There is much in the world right now that needs to be built in love. But we can make this a sweet year by not only singing Olam Chesed Yibaneh, we will build this world in love, but by building the world we seek with this loving community. This can be a year of us acting together and supporting each other, even when we disagree. And we can say, Lashana Tova, Tikatevu, Umituka. May we all be inscribed for a good and sweet year. We can say that without any jadedness or cynicism if we commit to just helping each other. This will be a sweet year because we can trust each other. We can help each other. Let's inscribe this year as a moment of powerful tshuva, as a turning point from grief to despair, to love and repair. Let's make this a good year. Lashana Tova.